Yeah, thank you very much. My brother read my citation. Most often, I don't always like my citation to be read. But it always put me off balance. But I sincerely believe that maybe within a very short time, I will gather the moment and then back to my track. Certainly, I'm going to talk on restitutions and return of the looted Nigerian cultural objects. Specifically looking at the matters arising from that issue. And before I go further into that, I will first of all want to appreciate the kind gesture from the CBCIU, that Center for Black Culture and International Understanding, for inviting me here. It's a very great honor for me to be invited and stand before the podium. Though presently the podium is getting hot for me, but I think as time goes on, it will cool down. Yeah. Again, I so much appreciate the effort of the audience we have in the house now, and large other number of people who have already linked with the Zoom connections throughout. So again, I also want to state here that yes, I have very brief modifications on the title, and that is I tried to change the word artifacts to cultural objects, simply because of the fact that I'm coming from a background of archaeology and anthropology. And in archaeology, we often refer to artifacts as materials retrieved from the soil, which we now keep in the laboratory for further analysis and for further training. So they are specimens for our scientific understanding. But again, I also noticed the fact that, yes, there is a confusion in a lot of terms, a lot of concepts that define cultural objects. Sometimes they call it antiquities. Sometimes they will call it cultural property. Sometimes they will even call it, cultural heritage. So there is this confusion. And so I feel comfortable using cultural objects, which now revert to, all these concepts that we are referring to. And again, I also look at the title, and I did a brief modification of the title too. And I changed the title to Restitutions and Return of Looted Nigerian Cultural Objects, Matters Arising. The reason for this is just that, yes, we have to be specific because there are a lot of looted cultural objects that are looted from Africa, in Ethiopia, in Mali. Mali is still suffering from that as a result of a last crisis, military push in Mali. More than 7,500 artifacts, cultural objects, were looted, including the first handwritten Quran that was serialized there. So there are a large number. Ghana also fell into the same crisis, large number, Burkina Faso, and largely Africa, many African countries. And so we need to be very precise, because the idea here is just to look at Nigerian looted cultural objects. And so, again, like I've actually, tried to plot my presentations into 12 major sub-items. The first one is going to talk about introduction. Then I will talk about understanding the concept, because restitutions and return, they mean different things. And so we need to really understand it. What are the implications of this understanding to us? What do they mean? We need to establish that. Then we also need to look at the process and format of looting of Nigerian cultural objects. And then look at the factors influencing that influence the looting and trafficking of a cultural object in Nigeria. Then we are also going to look at the magnitude of the looting, because we need to actually place the magnitude in perspectives so that we know what we are even talking about. A situation whereby you have almost about 800, cultural objects taken away from a museum, or you have about thousands, several thousands of cultural objects taken away from the palace after destruction of that palace. So we are talking about a huge treasure. So we need to see the magnitude. And then we are going to talk about the processes involved in restitutions and return. Then what are the recent efforts made to get restitution and return, effective? And then we are going to talk about challenges affecting the returns and restitution. And lastly, the crux of the matter will actually be broken by looking at the matters arising from the restitutions and returns of cultural property. And so by way of introduction, yeah, of course, like within the last 2 decades, Nigerian looted a cultural object, domiciled in different European and American museums. European museums like you find in UK, Germany, France, Portugal, and several other places. In America, museum. They started generating a lot of controversies, a lot of issues, a lot of concern. And so the major debate is just, okay, how do we get these matters back to Africa? And so if we are getting these matters back, this object back to Africa, what can we do? And as a result of that, yeah, there are 2 major reasons why these have become so concerned to Nigeria especially. The first one is, Nigeria is actually reworking the state project into actually building nationalism. And we get to know that identity matters, cultural link matters, the history matters in this construction. So, and most of these cultural objects, they form the basis for the expression of our cultural identity. And they also inform us about the unity that have been on. You talk about Nok culture, you talk about Ife bronze, you talk about Igbo culture, and all these, they have, similarities. And that tells us that, yes, there was a technology in the past. And so how do we actually bring in this technology to bear on the nationalism and identity of the people? And so the debate on this became very hot. And Nigeria now began to say, yes, most of these objects that will actually contribute to our nationalism, that will actually evoke the cultural consciousness of being together, they are not here. And so the cultural objects speak to the context of where they are made. They don't speak to the context of where they are found. So it is where they are made. And so once they are made here, we need to straight them here and use that as a basis for the analysis of our cultural images across Nigeria. That is the first one. The second reason is just that, yes, at this particular point in time, there was a dwindling economy, especially that rests on oil. And so once there is a dwindling economy rest on oil, then there is a need for looking elsewhere, especially in the area of tourism, where revenue could be generated. And so these 2 factors put together now created a kind of concern that, yes, we need to look at how those objects were looted, how can we actually bring them back to the country, and how do we actually, establish these factors we have actually talked about. And so when we now begin to look at that, we also need to look at how the objects were looted from Nigeria. And there are 2 levels at which the objects were looted. The first one has to do with the British colonialism, and the second one has to do with the post-Nigerian independence theft of cultural objects. So the first one, of course, by 1887, the first attempt was made, to destroy the palace of Oba of Benin, So we are more than about 4,000. Of course, the literatures have been so, inconsistent about the number of cultural objects that were looted from that place. So some literature now begin to say, 3,000, 4,000, and 5,000, but we know that thousands of objects were looted from the palace of the Benin. And again, and most of these objects, when they were looted during the colonial era. That's precisely 1887. And so they were taken offshore. They were exported out of Nigeria. And so later they found themselves in different parts, in different places throughout the world, even including the United States of America. And so many museums, many private homes, began to, warehouse this object. And so again, between 1967 and 1970, during the Biafran War in Nigeria, about 800 cultural objects were captured from Oron museums in southern Nigeria. And so this also, this large number of, cultural objects also spread to, various places in the world. And again, through unauthorized scientific research, accidental discovery of cultural objects, antiquity theft, then unholy donations, and the trafficking of a cultural property. Large number of cultural objects from Nigeria precisely, they left Nigeria shore, and then they were exported outside Nigeria. So the number becomes so big, all this time, apart from the Benin sculpture, the cultural objects that were taken from Benin, the ones that were taken from Oron Museum in 1970, 67 to 70. So there are a lot of other efforts that have been made, through which, most of these cultural objects actually left the shore of Nigeria outside to other countries. And so significantly, we got to know that the major countries that actually involved in warehousing the cultural object, they were, Britain, Germany, France, and America. Those are the major countries. This is not to say that there are no other countries outside there that are still warehousing. But majority of these cultural objects that were trafficked, that were taken by war, during the war, they are located in this area of, the America, Britain, Germany, and then France. So they have the largest stock of this cultural property. And so for more than 100 years, beginning from 1900, Nigerian looted cultural objects served the European and American society as an object of aesthetics, so that people would just look at it and say, these are the technology of the black people. They now begin to look at it. These are the motifs which these cultural objects carry, without actually having a deeper interrogation of how they have created historical consciousness on the people that made them. So they serve that purpose. And then they also become the object of revenue generation. And more importantly, they become the object that actually being studied to create another crop of scholars who are non-African based Africanists, So especially those who are interested in art history, they will just go to those museums and they will study them without actually bringing the consciousness, historical consciousness, and identity construction into place. And so, as a result of that, of course, most of these looted objects, they generated several billions of dollars revenue for the host. Of course, there is no single literature that has been able to capture the entirety, the enormosity of what they have created. Of course, like many of us that actually, that might have been to Europe, especially you go to Bonn in Germany, the very first thing that will create your curiosity is just, okay, let's go and visit a museum. And you get there, you know how much you pay to enter a museum. And so you can now imagine a particular museum, in Lisbon, in London, in Bonn, creating an avenue for almost about 1,000, 2,000 people in a year going to the museum to watch, to observe this cultural object. You can now imagine, the quantum of, revenue that has actually generated. So what we are saying in essence is just that the actual significance, the actual relevance of this cultural object were denied. And what are these actual relevance? Is the construction or reconstruction of historical consciousness. Historical consciousness in the fact that, yes, we are all from Niger area. And then we develop a certain technology almost at the same time, which actually pervade, different techniques, different ethnicity. Yeah, as we are talking about Ife terracotta, you talk about Igbo culture, you talk about Nok culture, you talk about, Benin bronze. These are, they litter the entire Nigeria. Or you talk about Ashia, soft stone in Ashia, the figurines of Ashia, where you get, several thousands of figurines that were actually unheartened from the soil there, So, and the point we are raising here is just that the significance and the actual relevance of the cultural objects were denied, being simply because of the fact that they were housed outside the domain of their origin. And again, too, to even use this cultural object to create, to express symbols, to express collective unity in a diverse cultural space like Nigeria becomes very difficult. Because the part play in expressional culture, in creating awareness of oneness among a diverse group of people cannot be overemphasized. So, and why those objects were, warehoused in those countries, they are denied of this significance. And so, as a result of that now, the effort now began to be made towards repatriation. I use repatriation now because I use repatriation to refer to the two terms, restitutions and return. Repatriation in this sense means bringing them back. So whichever way you want to do it now, which we are still going to look at later. So, and, effort now started being made to repatriate them back to Nigeria. Of course, at this particular point in time, it's not only Nigeria that is affected. Like I said earlier on, several other countries in Africa. Of course, at a point in time, the European countries found a favor in, working with African cultural objects, of course. And so they become, it's a fantastic romance which was created with this cultural object. And so while this was going on, then the repatriations now began. Effort to repatriate them began. Of course, we have a lot of conventions, a lot of norms, international norms that actually spark off this. We are still going to look at that later. But let's just look at what repatriation means. Yeah, and like I said, it refers to the two concepts. That is restitution and return. Yeah. So, and of course, these two concepts have also generated a lot of controversy, which we are still going to look at later. Especially when you talk about the application of the term. When you also talk about, how these concepts define the categories of objects that were taken away from Africa or from Nigeria. Or when you are also talking about how those objects were taken away, the cultural objects were taken away, as we shall see later now. And so it also defines the international politics that come to play for the purpose of repatriation. Of course, there was a case in Nigeria that involved Nigeria and France in 1970, which we are still going to look at, where the court now begin to look at, okay, what is the willingness? What is the identity of these people that will actually support the fact that, yes, this, the cultural property, the cultural object that was to be repatriated belonged to these people, or it was taken during the wartime. These are issues that crop up. So we are still going to. So all these issues now form the central focus of my discussions today. That is to say that, yeah, we are going to look at what is return and restitution, and how does that actually implicate on the effort to repatriate a cultural object back to Nigeria. And so even when some of these repatriated cultural objects were in Nigeria, what are the reactions of Nigerians to it? What are the reactions? Is Nigerian highly prepared to house them and make them functional as they were functional in those countries where they were brought back? But then that question does not really arise now, simply because it is my property and I can decide how to use my property and what I'm going to use my property for. Nobody has the right to say, yeah, this is how you are going to use your property. So all these now form the central focus of our discussion. And so we have to start from the understanding of the concept, because this is very important for us. The two concepts that that this topic deals with is restitutions and return. Restitutions and return. And so both of them have a circumstantial and legal meanings and usages. Circumstantial meanings in the fact that they define how those cultural objects were removed from where they were removed. That is first one. While restitution defines that, yes, it is the objects, the cultural objects that are only pillaged during the wartime. Whereas return, it could be either things that were given out voluntarily, or you purchase them, or you traffic them. But they are not concerned about war. There was no war when they were carted away. So, and again, too, they also begin to tell us about what are the processes that are needed to be undertaken before they can be repatriated. If it is a returned object, what are the processes that are necessary to be put in place before you can actually get them back? And so this has generated a lot of issues. I will not really delay us on this. The issues that are generated on this, they are willingness. That is the first one. Willingness of the originator, willingness of the original owner of this cultural property or cultural object to release them. In restitution, the originator, the maker of this object, those who owns this object, they did not willingly release it. Like it happened in 1897 in Benin. It was as a product of a warfare. There was an intentional war, this deliberate war caused on the palace of Oba of Benin. Because they got to know that there were treasures in the palace of Oba of Benin, and they went there to actually cause war, and then they took away more than 4,000. Let's just say precisely 4,000. More than 4,000, because like I said, Professor Shiloh has actually accounted that several thousands of these, so several thousands, So Elujoba said 7,000. So, but in a situation of war, you cannot actually get an appropriate figure. But we just put it as a very mild figure of 4,000. We are talking about 4,000 figurines, exotic figurines, that actually depict the technology, expert technology, and advanced technology with a very good motive that actually projected the identity of the people, even beyond their immediate soil. So there are a lot of things that actually inform. And like Archeology also said, like there is a long year of transatlantic relationship that have been in existence among the people in Africa. So if you now begin to say, okay, yes, the white people brought this, they brought that, it's a lie. So most of these cultural objects